episode 98 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 14th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, by my interview guests, and by listeners who contact the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to our friends in Canada, Ryan, Jen, and Sharon, listeners Pamela in Alabama, Christine in California, and Jackie in Texas. Jackie wrote an incredibly thoughtful email just one day after last week's episode posted, and I asked her if I might be able to share it with you today. Jackie wrote, "This is my first year as a librarian, and I'm so grateful for your podcast. I'm coming back to work this year after being a stay-at-home mom for 4 years. My area has been hit hard by COVID, so I've yet to have one student in my library, as we have been remote learning. It's been really challenging because I do feel like the Lone Ranger, as Lori Davis puts it. I get very little feedback or guidance as my administration has tremendous challenges they are dealing with every day. I did start a virtual book club after hearing your episode with Kitty Feldy. It's been incredibly challenging, but I have a small core group that have been great to work with. I try to get guidance from other librarians in my district, but with this pandemic, I feel this apathy that has been hard to break through. It is so refreshing to hear you and your guests speak so passionately of this career I'm so excited to be a member of. Thank you for your wonderful podcast." And I really want to tell Jackie why it's so important to hear from listeners like her. And that's because when we learn more about the people who are tuning in each week, it's much easier to get a sense of what types of episodes would be helpful and would be appreciated. And it definitely gives not just validation to the guests who come on my show and to me, but it also helps us realize that there are topics that need to be addressed. And I am really excited because I'm working on an episode that was requested by our listener, Ryan, who is in Canada. And until it's all ready to go, I'm not going to tell you anything more about it. But Ryan gave a quick shout out and mentioned a couple topics that we should cover in the podcast. And I'm really excited because it's coming together behind the scenes. And when it does, you'll all know about it soon enough. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, questions, and episode suggestions, either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Virtual Collaboration, and my interview with Sarah Sansbury. Sarah Sansbury, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, Sarah, I have wanted to have this conversation for some time, especially now that we are all finding ourselves working virtually. I'm so glad you came to join us on the podcast for this conversation. Have you been virtual since March?
Yes, I have.
Wow. And
yeah.
No return to hybrid, no.
None. And there's no time soon that we are going to be going back. It looks like with the numbers.
Wow, that was my next question. I know that a lot of families have been incredibly impatient to get their kids back in school. And I'll be honest, we started remotely. And within, I'm not kidding, we started on the 8th of September. Within about 3 weeks, the Board of Education was insisting we put together a hybrid program, and we're going to get all our kids back into a hybrid situation. And right now, our elementary is hybrid, and it still was met with pushback because families didn't think it through. But if only half of the school is in the building at a time, that means your kid only goes to school every other day. We have discovered, as everyone has discovered, there's no pleasing everyone when it comes to what we're doing. So let's back up. Would you tell us what your pre-pandemic library is like, and the before time before the end of days? Could you tell us what you would have felt very typical for you going to school?
So before COVID, BC, gosh, it seems so long ago. Well, okay, so I was actually at a different school than I am now. I was in a middle school, grades 6 through 8. Just your typical media specialist. There was never a time, well, it was very rare that I didn't have kids or teachers in the media center. It was bustling. So the idea of not being around kids, around teachers in person, it definitely, that was the biggest weird thing about virtual, I think.
Well, and I'm curious because you have started in a new building in the midst of a pandemic.
Yes.
So, I think that's great because we can talk about this topic, virtual collaboration, from a perspective of somebody you are just now trying to build those relationships with this new staff of yours. I know a lot of us are lucky to have, say, been in the building as a teacher, moved into the library. It was a sort of natural progression. And for many people, it's been an adjustment, but you certainly aren't starting in a brand new school. Collaboration means a lot of things to different people. In season 1, episode 7, I argue that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to what collaboration looks like. It may look different for middle school librarians and high school librarians and the elementary librarians, especially those of us, say, on a fixed schedule versus a flexible schedule. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what collaboration meant before the pandemic? And this would be in your middle school setting.
Yeah. So to me, I think the main thing we're doing is you need to know your students, your teachers, your school community, so you can meet their needs. And to me, that's why there's not a one size fits all. So collaboration for me is getting to know the curriculum that the teachers are teaching, getting to know what the demographics of the students, what's the typical thing they like to read. I found out they loved manga. So I was like, okay, we're going to get manga. We're going to get it, loads of it. And being able to really be on the heart, what is it? I'm imagining like a nurse checking the heartbeat of a patient. That's what we're doing. We're like, okay, what's happening here? Okay. And so you know how to respond and how to, what your next steps will be for collaborating.
Well, and, I think what is easy, the more we build relationships with our building staff, you have an idea. I know for me, my go-tos, automatic go-tos, my first people I collaborated with always were my green teachers, my brand new, just, and they were just 22 years old, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and yet completely new to this building. And it was sort of like your friend to the friendless. Like you're coming into this room and you're like, I'm going to be your friend. I'm the school librarian and I want to help you out. And those are my easy go-tos. And to a certain extent, those are the obvious ones. But then, you want to make sure that people who are starting a subject for the first time. So I know in the middle school, if you've got somebody who's shifted grade, like a grade level, or shifted to a different subject matter, or they used to always be, this particular, English, grade 6, and now they're moving to grade 8, and we have to figure out how we're going to make that adjustment. When people make those kinds of changes, coming in and being that source of support, I know has always endeared me to somebody. I'm sure I bothered people and I probably was a little intrusive, but if you make their jobs easier, it's going to be helpful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think and I was thinking back into collaboration to me, because I first was an English teacher for years, for like over a decade in a classroom. So I've actually been a teacher longer than I've been a media specialist. So really, when I stepped into this role, I really was like, I want to be the media specialist that I would want as a teacher. And when you put it that way, it just kind of changes everything. Like, it's not even like the teachers that are switching to new subjects or new grades. Like, if there's a big curriculum change, like we started doing writing and reading workshop at my school. So learning that curriculum and being proactive and going to them like, hey, these are the ways I can support you. You're not alone in this. We are a team. We're here together. It was pretty powerful.
Well, and I know when the next generation science standards came out, there was all these science teachers were looking to, sort of try new ways of teaching, and they were doing a lot of revisions, but there were some things that were moving around with grade levels. And so it definitely is a matter of being tuned in to the kinds of things that are impacting our teachers. I love that you mentioned that you were formerly an English teacher. Do you think that made it easier for you to did you gravitate instinctively to your people and used to like, dude, I used to be right where you were. I know that you're going to do this lesson, and next day you're going to do this lesson. And I mean, it seems to me, because I'm a high school social studies teacher, so I like those social studies resources are always the ones that I just get so excited about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I knew exactly what we're going to, certain grade levels we're going to be doing. Specifically the grade level that I've been teaching for many years, which is interesting though, even though I know how things are taught in the English classroom, and I was a 7th grade primarily. I didn't quite know what was happening in the 6th grade, 8th grade. So I really had to find out. I went up to them like, hey, what unit are you going on? I went and looked at the milestones test. We're like, okay, I looked at the standards, and I really did a lot of homework, I think, before I actually went up to them and said, these are the ways I can help you. But I mean, I'm a nerd though. I love helping with social studies and science. All the things. So
something that I really liked hearing about when Bethany Mostew mentioned when she was talking about pushing into the classrooms, one of the great things about being in a teacher's classroom is you look around, and this is obviously something that would have happened pre-pandemic, that you would have a better way to sort of see and look around the classroom and see what kinds of things the teacher was doing with their classes. And even if that isn't a big project, and you get to see how the teacher prioritizes the things that they do in their classrooms. And I know that that's something I really like doing when I was walking around the halls. I'd kind of poke my nose in and say, hey, how are you doing? Oh my gosh, your room's so cool. Let me see. I'm a little nosy Nelly, but you learn more about the teachers that way. You sort of get a flavor for what they do, because their rooms are such a reflection. It doesn't matter what class they teach, what grade they teach, or where they teach. Their classrooms are their home away from home. So, when you started teaching remotely last spring with your middle school teachers, how did you feel collaboration what were you doing to support your teachers in a way that you felt a librarian should be?
And actually, I feel like it started before pandemic times, before the pandemic. I feel like we're in a dystopian novel. I've been pushing all year to try to teach the kids, actually for several years, how to use our databases online, and how to ebooks, and how to incorporate in the classroom. And all year long, I've been working on them, the teachers, how to use Microsoft Teams and things like that. And the cool thing about it, when we had to go virtual, I felt like all that work paid off. Does that make sense? So I didn't feel like we were scrambling as much. So what I did see myself supporting teachers as is that they never taught synchronicity or asynchronous, they didn't even know what those words meant. Neither did I. And a lot of them had never used Flipgrid or some of the other really awesome tools. And so a lot of times I would be finding webinars and resources for them. But I also went to meetings. I asked, when are your grade level meetings? I want to be there. And sometimes I was just fly on the wall, just listening to what's happening. If there was something I could do to help or something I could contribute, I would. Sometimes I would just email them afterwards, like, hey, I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but I want to say, these are some great resources you can use in your classroom. Or I noticed we paid for Nearpod, but not a lot of people were using it. So I knew that the science teachers, 6th grade science teachers were doing solar system. So I made a video and I'm like, here in Nearpod, you can look up standards and look at the things you could find. And so once I found out what they were teaching, I targeted and said, hey, there's this you can use. Hey, did you know there are breakouts on solar system that you can do digitally? And you know what? The thing is, what I've learned about collaborating, you got to be okay with no's or rejections. Like you got to balance that whole, like, you don't want to be obnoxious. You have to be sensitive to that. But the more they see you, I feel like being a partner and wanting to help, I don't know. It really forms organically. You become more of a team instead of two like separate departments that are, occasionally collaborating.
Well, and I know this came up in a conversation I did with Amanda Jones when we talked about curating, because when it came to initially supporting our teachers during the pandemic, there was such this onslaught of information and resources that the one thing that we really tried to do was sort of step back and filter all of that. And rather than, assault our staff with resources which may or may not be helpful, trying to sort of fine tune and target the resources. Like we're sort of like concierge. We're sort of like matching the resource with the topic. And I think they appreciate that because they realize that when you email them, it's going to be valuable. I know recently I support our virtual school, and one of my teachers in virtual school, one of my kindergarten teachers said, hey, Amy, I need to do community helpers. Can you, and obviously because it's virtual school, all the resources have to be virtual. Whereas when I work face to face and I work in my hybrid programs during the day, I can run materials down because our students who are hybrid are IRL face to face. And then so what happens is if that's a first grade teacher or a kindergarten teacher who wants, community helpers, I can then email all my first grade teachers or all my kindergarten teachers and say, hey, I made this. And I wouldn't necessarily like single out the person who said, hey, Amy, community helpers. By the same token, when I do my screencasts to support my teachers, oftentimes I don't refer to the teacher or the grade level. I say, hey, friends, blah, 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 because I don't want to use a specific teacher and I don't want to use a specific grade level, because oftentimes what we're sharing with a teacher can apply to multiple grade levels and can apply to multiple, subject matter. And that has gotten a lot of traction. I do get some thank yous. I definitely get Amy, this hits the spot. This is fantastic. You kind of read you read my mind.
Yes, I know. And I love it because it just feels so good. I feel like, you mentioned like a concierge. I feel like a resource dating app, like, oh, we found the perfect match. Yay. Right. Match made in heaven. I know. And I think it's interesting because I've done the same thing, and I've really kind of learned, okay, so how do I email this and they're actually going to read it? So I'm like screenshots, I'm going to have pictures, it's going to be bulleted. I really want them to be able to glance at this and they know exactly what it is. But because what I realized going back to thinking about how I was as teachers are feeling like, I don't want one more thing to do. They're feeling a lot of pressure. So yes, we want to be there and support them, but how can we do that without making them feel like it's one more thing versus collaborating and, this incorporation, to what they're already doing.
I'm really curious, Sarah, you are in a brand new building. You're teaching brand new grade levels. and you have started and will continue to be virtual. So as the brand new librarian, I know it's really been important for you to make a good impression. I'm sure that you want to make sure your teachers feel supported. Can you share with us a little bit about how you, a brand new librarian, obviously this is not your rookie year. You have some great ideas. They're all, relevant more to the middle school setting, but how have you found some success supporting your grades 4, 5, this brand new building of yours? How have you been doing that virtually?
So, before we started school, I really was thinking really hard about this. How are we going to do this? And it's not just the challenge of teaching virtually or collaborating virtually. I'm starting a brand new place. I don't even know these people. Many of them I've never seen in real life ever before. My interview with my principal was on the phone. I mean, I didn't even saw to face when I got the job. So it was really bizarre. So that was the part, I think, obviously, the biggest challenge is because relationships is so important in collaboration, and they don't know me from anybody. So, I mean, and in general, the perception of the media specialists, I don't think typically it is one who is collaborating in the classroom. At least that's the old school view of it. And so I really felt like right away we needed to have quick successes, quick wins. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that you need that to be able to get the ball rolling. So I did create a library menu, and I can share that with you of all the virtual things I could do. I invested into getting us some more, and basically I created like this. I was trying to do something really dynamic to catch their attention and say, these are examples of things I can do. And a lot of them were like, this is great. But many of them did not bite right away on that. Because a lot of it, I think they really had no idea who I was. They felt overwhelmed themselves. I think in their mind, this is just one more thing to happen. And so that's when I really started virtually stepping into their grade level meetings, asking, I want to be a part of this. And so I attended all of them, not just the ELA and the social studies. I went to the math and to the science. I even went to the grade level meetings. I was like, you're going to get to know me, or at least I'm going to get to know you. I don't know, one way or another, we're going to get to know each other. And that to me was, I think, the tipping point. When they really saw me in those meetings, I feel like they saw me as one of them. Like, you weren't just this random person in this separate room, but you're part of the team. And for that quick successes and quick wins, I would suggest things. And, you always have to get that one person who's just up for trying anything, right? And once they do, and you reel them in, and that's how you reel everybody else in. And that's kind of how it's happened. Like, I just kind of offered, hey, I can do this. One of the things I did is I did talk to Amanda over the summer, Amanda Jones, about doing a virtual field trip. So I was like, I want to put that on my menu. And the funny thing is, I'm offering all these services for virtual learning. And some of them, I was like, I've never done this before. But you know what? I'm going to learn how to do it. So I did say I could do virtual field trips. And I talked to Amanda. I said, you don't know me. And I don't know you, but I really am a big fan. And I would you want to do a virtual field trip with me?
So, friends, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I've seen this virtual field trip that Sarah took with Amanda. And, friends, we're definitely including a link in the show notes. And, I would not know that you two hadn't collaborated before. I think that that is something that collaborating with other school librarians, there's something about working with people who are so like-minded, and you don't have to explain why the things you want to do are important. And, I really do. I love doing that. Obviously, I find opportunities to collaborate with school librarians every time we work on an episode, because we both feel very passionately that the information that we want to convey is something worth sharing with an audience. So I think that's wonderful. And I love that you want to do these quick wins. And as somebody who supports our virtual school and will for the rest of the school year, I think it's incredibly important that our staff is aware of what we are doing to support them, because I increasingly get the sense that if people don't know what you do, they will decide you're doing nothing. And they, by contrast, have never worked harder in their lives. And the one thing you don't want to do is have people resent the fact that you are doing your job. They just don't understand what it looks like. So.
Exactly. And I will tell you, this summer, I kept thinking, I was like, there's budget cuts, so many, the economy. I'm thinking like, got this brand new job, and I think even more than ever, we need to make sure that we are seen and that they understand the value of a media specialist. I'm very active on social media because of that, and I tag our superintendent and the head of the English department. And I want to make sure people know, because we are doing fabulous things, but people may not know that we're doing it. I'm putting things in the parent newsletter. I'm putting on the school Facebook page. You just have to put yourself out there. And you will see really awesome results from it. At least I have.
Well, and I agree. I see a lot of opportunity for promotion. I see a lot of opportunity for self-advocacy, that when we do what we are doing, there is this, reminder that we need to make sure people see what we do and value it. And there's no better time than to swoop in during a pandemic and offer people resources when they don't have them. And,
yes.
and, I appreciate you talk about laying that foundation with your students and talking about digital resources, but it never seemed more relevant until we went to a situation where we had no physical libraries. We had no physical space. We were no longer in the schools. But you know what? I tell my students when I'm teaching them in those screencasts, teaching about their databases, I said, look, it wouldn't have mattered if we were in school in person. If you walk through my door right now in the library, I'd be teaching you these databases just the same. And the reason why is because what we have in these databases is better than anything I have on those shelves right now, especially when it comes to that research assignment or that passion project or that genius hour activity that you're doing with your classroom. I have a great collection, but to support you and the things that you're doing and to really, it really did bring home for a lot of our teaching staff and our students and our families as well, just how important it is to recognize those digital resources as being a resource as much as the print collection that we support as well. What do you find particularly challenging about collaborating virtually?
So in my particular situation, we talk about one size fits all. Our teachers have very limited face-to-face time with our students virtually. And that live time is very limited. I already can see, especially, and that's another reason why I'm at those meetings. I want to catch, what is the mood here? What are people feeling, so I can have a better way of knowing how to help them. And they're feeling pressured. They feel like they don't have enough time to teach all these standards. They are really focusing on the basics and cutting out some of the fun stuff. Sadly, I think, because they feel really pressured and they feel like they don't have a lot of time. So I knew that immediately, the idea of actually going live with the students or pushing in that way was not going to work. So anything I've offered has been something that can be done independently or a video recording. And that's worked really well. So I think that was one of the challenges, is that just trying to figure out how best to support when you couldn't do anything in person, or I'm not interacting with the students at all, in that sense. And that's really tough. So I've had to find other ways of interact with the students, and that's thing.
Well, and I know all our specials teachers are, especially at the elementary school, are really trying to find a way to support our students, because like you said, when you're teaching virtually, that face-to-face time, there's such a premium with the teachers. I remember in the very beginning of this pandemic being asked by our administration, hey, just ask the teachers for 10 minutes. You'd be surprised how many teachers were like, Amy, we're really I see my kids for I'm going to talk to them for an hour. And if you take those first 10 minutes, all of a sudden I'm going to lose them. Are you sure you have to be at my class? Can't you do something separately with them? And I'm like, I don't have an LMS. I'm not on Schoology. And so, yeah, you're right. The face-to-face opportunities, and it does mean that our screencasts have to be really dynamic.
Yes.
And also, speaking to the things that the kids might really enjoy. I want to keep it positive. It's so it's too easy to talk about the things that we miss and talk about the things we wish we could do. But let's keep this positive. So there are some advantages to collaborating virtually. And I'd love for you to remind us of the reason why we can sort of look at the silver lining to being virtual and supporting our students and staff.
Yes. So things I think is really, these are the cool things I think about all the virtual learning, is I think we really have had to take all that stuff we learned about instructional technology and really say, oh, okay, we are not just typing up things on, Word. It really has to be more transformative. And I really see a lot of transforming in that. Something I did in the spring that I was really excited about is Martha Bongiorno at Nazar Middle School librarian. She and I did a joint virtual book club. I would have never thought to do that, would have never done it unless we were in a pandemic. And so we had students from one middle school and students from another middle school talking about a book and discussing it. And she had fifth graders, and I had my fifth graders that were going to be rising sixth graders for the next year, part of that book club. I mean, that was so fabulous. So these fifth graders are already getting to know people in the middle school and already joining the community. And she and I were getting to know these students that were coming up into the next year. I just thought it was fabulous. I thought, this is so great. I would love to continue something like that, because what a great way, especially if you did it, even if you just only held it in the spring, as a way to help with transition from elementary school to middle school for those students. I think other advantages is you have to think outside your box. And, what do they say? What is the motherhood of invention? The
necessity is the motherhood of invention.
And, we would have never thought of how to do, doing things like this virtual field trip. I would have never thought to do something like that beforehand. I would not have been able to I would never be able to be participating in all the grade level meetings and the different content level meetings. But with it being virtually, I am getting so much more information and getting so much more feedback on what teachers need. I feel like I'm helping a lot more in some ways. It's just a different type. It just looks a little bit different. I do a lot more curation. I'm doing a lot more behind the scenes stuff versus kids coming to the library and I'm teaching them how to find books or whatnot. But I love that I am able to go to all these meetings. I'm really hoping when we do go back, will they prop up a computer and let me join in still? I mean, that would be great. Other things I think are really cool is I've thought more about the idea of, okay, so yeah, it really stinks. I don't like not being able to see my students. But what are some things that are really cool that we could have now in place because we are virtual? So I started a book club with this idea that we were going to read a book. And with every book that we read, we would have some kind of mystery Skype expert on that book. And I know mystery Skype is no new thing, but I would have never thought to to do some of that. We would just read the books, blah, blah, talk about them, maybe we'd visit an author. But it's really kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. So we're going to be reading Saving Winslow by Sharon Creech, where there's a little boy that's kind of raising a sickly donkey. It's very much Charlotte's Web, but it's a donkey. And so we're going to have a virtual interview with an animal sanctuary. And so, there's all kinds of things. I would have never thought to do that. And I feel like these kids are getting an even better experience than if we were just in person and doing books. I don't know. I there's things I really miss about it, but there's things I've really enjoyed.
Well, I'll tell you, selfishly, somebody who's taught on a fixed schedule for the last 13 years, I have taught 6 and 7 classes a day, all day, every day. And the classes just keep on coming.
Mm-hmm.
And, for the first time, this is now year 14 for me, and I'm not teaching a fixed schedule. And
wow.
You realize that there is something to be said for being able to shift some of your attention and reassess what you do and see those opportunities where you do. And as somebody who teaches in 4 buildings, attending
wow.
staff meetings means I have to navigate which one I'm going to go to physically. If I'm not there, it means I'm hauling across town from one building to another one. I'm always the one walking in late and, out of breath. I'm like, I'm here. And, making that little stupid entrance. And, I think that you're right. I mean, when you, especially for those of us who want to be in these meetings, if all we have to do is click on a Zoom link or, a Teams meet or Google Meet, we can be in multiple places. I remember, working with a classroom and then clicking on my department meeting and then clicking on to my building meeting, and I was still sitting in the same place. I could literally be in 3 places at once. And
exactly.
And the first time that happened, I was like, wow, this is really kind of cool. I'm not applying for mileage anytime soon, but, I think that, true confession, I'm a librarian this is year 14. I am hosting my first book club of my career right now because some of my teachers said, hey, could you work with a couple of our students? And I'm like, yes, I can. Because you know what I'm not doing? I'm not teaching 6 classes a day. When you teach 6 classes a day, you will never host a book club. So
yes, I know.
That is a lot of fun. I heard an interesting question asked the other day on a podcast I was listening to, and it was, are there some aspects of the remote teaching which you expect will remain long after we've returned to face-to-face instructions? In other words, will you continue to virtually collaborate even when you eventually return to school and work IRL?
I hope so. I hope I can still go to meetings, even if I'm shelving books while listening. And I will say, I have said if I can't go to the meeting, I read the minutes, and the other thing I think, so this is another thing that I did collaborate with other librarians. So we have 3 different elementary schools in our area, and we have like a reading goal. 2 of the ladies I was working with had never done a virtual book club. And I was like, well, I've done one. And I was like, why don't we do it all together? And we'll just learn together. And it was such a great experience. This idea of these 3 elementary schools coming together. And I just think that's amazing. And the only way we could have done that is through technology. And I've been able to get 2 authors that we read 10 books, and I got 2 authors out of the 10 to come and talk. And so all 3 of our schools are coming together to listen to this author and get to know these writers. And I just think it's really been really awesome. And I feel like I've been actually collaborating with school librarians more than I did before, because I feel like when you are in person at your school, you're so focused on your school community. And here, when I feel like I am more looking to I'm looking to other school librarians as partners, and like, how can we all together help our schools? It feels like, for so long, I feel like you did your thing, I did my thing, and this other librarian did this thing. And then I feel like now during the pandemic, I'm like, wait a second, why don't we're all doing the same thing, but 3 different times over? Why don't we kind of take turns and help each other out? So for instance, in that book club, we did a read aloud, but we took turns, like, oh, I'll do these chapters, I'll do these chapters, I'll do those chapters. And so these kids are hearing multiple different people read to them, which I know they love, like hearing someone different. And it was less work on our half. Does that make sense? Like, many hands make for light work. So I think I'm hoping that virtual collaboration with other librarians will continue. I'm hoping the virtual meetings will continue. And I think it'd be really cool to have more virtual book clubs where you can combine different schools. Like, it would be really cool in the spring if I got 5th graders from schools that are feeding into my, I'm not a middle school anymore. Well, let me back that up. No, so I'm a 4th and 5th grade school. So I would get the 3rd graders that are coming up there. What if they were doing a book club with the 4th and 5th graders? I mean, there's so many cool things you can do. What if you did the book New Kid, talking about like starting a new school? And I just think there's so many really cool things you can do. And like you said, we could focus on all the negative stuff, or we could really see, okay, well, what's good about this?
I'm formulating a theory, and it is, it's not that you never thought of these ideas before, but I think that when we are in our physical spaces, we are so, surrounded with all the immediacy of our program,
sure.
Whether it's the humans walking through the space. I mean, it's sort of Grand Central Station. It doesn't matter what grade you teach. It could
Sure.
be, your class is coming in and out to do whatever it is, or maybe they're over there for makerspace, or they're coming in for their classes, or they're doing their book checkout, or they're, it's always a very busy space. And, I remember trying to keep track of my day. And it was like I was taking care of all these needs coming at me, these student needs, the teacher needs, the administrator had something they needed. And I felt like I was always putting out these fires, and then I was teaching on top of that. I mean, how are you possibly supposed to come up with these sort of clever, collaborative, opportunities that you do with other school librarians when you can't see past the immediate needs of your own physical space?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And when you are at home, and I know that you've done a lot of reflecting, we've all had time to reflect on how we do our jobs as we are removed from our space. And I've talked about this before, this idea that our collection is a resource, our physical space is a resource, and we are the resource.
Yeah.
And so we have had to rely on ourselves as the resource and allow that to grow. It makes so much sense to connect with other school librarians who are also removed from their space, removed from their happy place, and now going, what do? I have to do something. I can't possibly not do anything. And you look to each other and say, this is fantastic. So I do want to go back a little bit to your virtual field trip with Amanda Jones. Could you sort of walk us through that process of the brainstorming to the how did you do that? Because I think a lot of librarians would love to do something like that, and we'll include an example in the show notes. But can you give us just sort of a basic step-by-step from how you went from I have a great idea to actually recording your webinar?
Yes. So again, I think it first starts off with finding out what your school needs are, because I would hate to make something and it's not be something that was needed, or, take because it took a lot of time. So I found out what the classes were to be learning in the first few months. And when I reached out to Amanda, and I said, she has 5th graders at her school. And so we kind of had similar curriculum at the same time. We're like, oh, that's perfect. Let's try this. And So that was the first thing, finding your school's needs. And then we set a date. I found that when the teachers were teaching that unit, so it'd be done around that time. She has a slideshow or slide deck that she uses for all her field trips that she's made in the past. And so she shared that with me. We talked through Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And we then kind of divided up like the quick hands make for light, many hands make for light work. So, I said, I'll do this part. It kind of just was very organic. I'm really excited about this. Oh, I really like that. And so we decided, okay, I'm going to do these slides. Okay, I'll do these slides. And it all kind of came together. Now, for me, since I was a newbie, I did go back to some of her prior field trips and looked at, I see she has 2 big pictures, and then she has like 2 links to these, virtual reality field trips that are online. So that kind of helped give me so we had a template, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we coordinated online. And, for people who don't know who Amanda Jones is, she's in Louisiana. I'm in Georgia. I don't know her I've never met her in real life. I only know her from Twitter. So I think that was really cool and powerful. So the next step after we created the slides is we're like, okay, well, we're going to record on this day. And my second time ever talking to her in person is when we recorded. And, we went through the slides and kind of run through like you would do for a presentation. And then we did it. And it was so nerve-wracking and exciting and fun. And it really paid off in the end. Like I told you, I'm trying to find the school's needs. I told the teachers I can do this, and they kind of looked at me like, that's cool. I'm not sure I understand what the heck you're talking about. And then I made it, and then they saw it, and they're like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I was like, yeah, I know, right? And so now they're using it. And then I made this. So I've made 2 so far with Amanda. I made one on ecosystems and another one on plant and animal cells. One was for my 4th grade teachers. The other one was for my 5th grade teachers. And the 5th grade teachers freaked out. They're like, this is so amazing. And I thought, I was really happy because I was like, that took a lot of work. So I'm really glad because I don't know anything about animal and plants. I was never taught before. So I had to do a lot of research and really study the standards to really make those applicable. So I was really glad they did get something out of it. So that's pretty much from beginning to end.
And friends, I really do, the whole journey with Jones, I can attach a link in the show notes because Amanda has generously included her links to all of her virtual field trips. So it can inspire and it can, I think that what I most appreciate about anytime a school librarian shares resources like that is that it really, going in using this resource and taking a look at it, that it has been thought through like a school librarian. And I think that is something that is so incredibly helpful because you can sort of take a lot of comfort knowing that the things that you see are important. You're also going to see that attention to detail. School librarians, we are accustomed to doing things for large groups. And the last thing we want to do is put together something that looks shoddy or, or ill-prepared. So I do appreciate it. I also recognize the power of our PLN because, every time we do an episode, I know my PLN gets bigger and bigger. And I have regularly called upon people who have been guests on this podcast because I know I can rely on them to give us, resources and perspectives that really do help us navigate these sort of choppy waters of teaching virtually. And, meeting people on Twitter and you say, what's the big deal? It's social media. Yeah, but library social media is phenomenal.
It's powerful.
It is amazing. And this network of school librarians are, tackling these problems and doing so in a way that really is worth replicating and modifying and using in your own school programs. And, reaching out to other school librarians and having a book club across the district. no, you wouldn't have done this before because you would have been busy teaching 6 classes, or you would have been busy running the makerspace, or you would have been busy, running, materials in your Chrome carts up and down the elevators or whatever. But, the point is now that we have to be the resource as school librarians, when we collaborate, we may not have a collection we can run down to their classrooms, and we don't have a makerspace to offer them, but we can give them opportunities which didn't necessarily, they weren't on the radar before because we had our spaces. We could rely on our space, and now we have to rely on ourselves. As we move further and further into 2021, do you have any goals when it comes to collaborating virtually? Yes, I do. Well, I just thought of one during this podcast, the idea of doing something this spring where the 3rd graders are doing a book club with the 4th and 5th graders. I'm like, what? Haven't I thought of that before? Check, putting that on my to-do list. But I do have a big whiteboard next to my desk where my goal is to reel in at least one teacher from every subject area. And the way I've done that is I'm going to these meetings, I'm finding out their needs, and I'm being proactive. They didn't ask me to do that virtual field trip. I just did. And I thought, you know what? I will just post it on the school Facebook, maybe there will be a few kids will watch it. But it all worked out. So I think, to me, my goal is I'm going to reel in a teacher from every subject area and grade, and just kind of do that with being proactive, kind of putting like the donuts out on the table and to be like, look at this delicious donuts. Don't you want to take a bite? Well, and I think that as word spreads, you're going to find yourself in demand. And, it's sort of a be careful what you wish for, because all of a sudden you're going to have to start scheduling those virtual field trips, because you're going to find yourself creating more and more and doing those virtual book clubs. And I think it's absolutely critical that our teaching staff recognize just how incredibly valuable we can be to their teaching, albeit remotely. What advice would you give to school librarians who would like to be more opportunistic about their virtual collaborations? Well, I actually wrote a blog post about this that I will share with you later. But my really simple things is, one, you need to be proactive. You really need to change perceptions. You're not just sitting there checking out books all day. That's not what we do. So you need to be proactive. How you can be proactive is you need to find out your school's needs, and to really do that, you need to go pull out the standards of the curriculum of these teachers, and you need to go to their grade level meetings. You need to ask the question like, hey, right now I know in 5th and 4th grade at my school, what science unit they're teaching, what social studies teacher they're teaching, what math and which English, because you need to know what they're doing and their needs to be able to be proactive. So I can't say, hey, I have these resources. Did you know we have this? So going back, one, you need to be proactive, changing perceptions, but you have to find out the needs to be able to do that. So attending grade level meetings, being a part of the leadership team, any way you can show your presence and just kind of get to know more, that's really important. And then the other thing I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast is quick wins, like quick successes. Like you want something. I really try to make sure the first time I collaborate with a teacher, I make it as easy as pie for them. Like they really don't have to do much of anything. Does that make sense? Because I want them to go, wow, that was great. I want to do that again. And I know you were talking about being in more demand. What I found is like, if you get in more demand, then the next step is, oh, let me teach you how to make this, or hey, let's get some 5th grade students who are really interested in video editing and we'll make a virtual field trip with them. So it's just kind of a step-by-step process. Well, and it sounds like the more we think about it, it sort of spirals into these sort of opportunities that we have. And again, because we aren't surrounded with our collection, you aren't busy weeding a collection. You aren't busy genrefying. You are not changing all the shelf labels. You are not doing I don't want to use the word mundane because it's not. These are incredibly important things that we do to our physical space to increase the access to our students. And yet, absent of those activities, we now find ways to support our students and our teachers. And I can't thank you enough for sharing all of these great ideas with listeners today. Sarah, please tell listeners where we can find you on social media so we can expand our PLN.
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and my handle is Super Sansbury, Sansbury, because I'm obsessed with comics and its alliteration, all the things. So, but my first name is Sarah, so Super Sarah Sansbury.
Yes. All right. Well, fantastic. Well, Sarah, I truly hope that you have a wonderful couple weeks before we move into the holiday season. And I am excited to see all the great things that you're doing as I follow you on social media. Thank Sarah Sansbury enough for taking time out of what should have been a very quiet and relaxing evening to talk to me about virtual collaboration. And I especially want to thank her for not only sharing all of her insights, but also making sure that our show notes are really fun. And I really want to make sure that you have an opportunity to take a look at the resources which she so generously shared. I also wanted to make sure to give credit to Amanda Jones, frequent flyer to the podcast, for her wonderful resources on her website. And I included a link to Journey with Jones. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. The topic of our next episode will be Students' Right to Read, and my interview with Rachel Monk. I hope you will tune in.